Right. We were hanging out with one of my buddies. I think it was a bachelor party or something. And the club was letting out and we were in the parking lot and the cops came around and said, hey, y'all got to leave. It's like, okay, I'm not driving. I'm not in the position to drive, but I'm in the car and I can't go nowhere. Right. And the dude driving had left the car and, he was walking off somewhere and I'm sitting in the car and the cops came back around. We told y'all to leave. Doggone it, I got a freaking loitering ticket myself. Again, I paid the ticket because I ain't want to have no issues. But, so to your point, that stuff happens.
But see, their loitering is a citation in Florida. You go to jail.
See, look, and this was in Georgia. Yeah. So this was in Georgia, and I don't remember. It had to be 2007, something like that. So, and that's interesting there because state by state, there are different nuances that come into play, and to your point, and it's crazy. It's funny you even say that. Again, I am them takes on a whole new meaning. I could have gone to jail that night had it been Florida, and had it not been Georgia. And again, me and my homeboys, we all college educated. We're just hanging out, bachelor party from my buddy getting married. And just because we took a few extra minutes to leave the parking lot and got a loitering citation in Florida, that would have been clank, clank. We got to go to the pen.
It would have been
What's happening, y'all? This is Mike D with Black Fathers Now, where we're bringing the village to the brothers. Every couple of weeks, you can look forward to a quick inspirational message or a thought-provoking guest with knowledge and wisdom, all geared towards helping you be the best father that you can be. We're bringing the village to you. Now it's your turn to do something with what you learned. All right, y'all. Let's go. What's going on, fellas? This is Mike D with Black Fathers Now. And yo, man, we're going to have a really awesome conversation with a brother today that's really he's going to enlighten us on a situation that literally is impacting a lot of us within our community at a rate that, is faster than we'd like for it to impact us, but he's doing something about it. And this brother is none other than Mark Mitchell. And Mark is from the state of Florida, but he has a backstory that is extremely, it's amazing, man. And like when you get into it and you really hear what he's overcome, it really lets you know that we're talking to a special brother here. But he's originally from the state of Florida, and he's the creator of Chainless Change, Inc. It's a nonprofit that really works with helping brothers and sisters who have been challenged by the criminal justice system to pretty much get on their feet and get back into society, and puts them in a position in which they can go and thrive and be all that they can be. So we really shout out this brother in regards to the work that he's doing. He's not a father, but I'll tell you, the stuff that he's doing are things that we as dads, and I know the ladies are listening to, dads and moms and people within the community need to be aware of. And we also need to hear about it because these are scenarios that we need to support and get behind. So, fellas in the Black Fathers Now family, let's welcome my man, Mark Mitchell. How you doing, brother?
I'm well. How are you, man?
Man, I can't complain, man. I appreciate you taking time to come chop it up with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no doubt. Man, don't be nervous.
Is it that obvious?
Man, it's obvious, man. See, we're going to release this thing via audio and video. So the audio part, they're going to be like, what are you talking about? The video, they're going to be like, dude is sitting all at attention. Nah, you're good, man. You're good, bro. This is all about you. This is your story. So enjoy yourself. But before we get started, man, I always let the brothers give shout outs because, who are we without our village? And so give a quick shout out to all of those folks that are on your team, that are in your world, that allow you to do what you do on a regular basis because, we are only as strong as our village or as our team. So give a shout out to those folks to help to make things happen for you and Chainless Change, brother.
Okay, sure. There are actually a few people who are helping me out with things that are really, really making life easier for me. One of them is this young lady, Ashley Zachary, Deidre Johnson, Ivan Tate, all of them. Those people are really Dewan Heights. How can I forget? They're really kind of helping me navigate through some of the things that are challenges for me through this process, and I appreciate them. I mean, I said So this is a good time to be able to do so.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good stuff, man. And the thing is, and I think the reason that I do that, and I think it's extremely important, is that a lot of times we wait to give shout outs to the end. You know, you think about
Right.
an award show, you know, you give a shout out after you win your award, right? But I think we need to do a better job of really giving shout out and kind of helping to put the wind beneath the wings of those that are kind of helping us to go while we're in the process, not wait
I
until
agree.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff. So, you know what? I mean, brother, you got a dynamic story. You got a dynamic journey. Let's go to the origin story, man. Like, talk to us a little bit about, talk to us a little bit about growing up, man, and talk to us a little bit about your story and what led you to create Chainless Change.
Okay, sure. Well, for most of my young life, kind of started at like 12 years old. I was actually incarcerated,
Mm-hmm.
and I grew up, in and out of the foster system. And because I entered at an older age, it was really difficult, to actually be placed with a home. No one wants like
Mm-hmm.
the older kids. Everyone's after the young children that they can smoothly transition into their family unit. And so what happened with me was really not unique to what happens to a lot of people, but I ended up going from foster care or a foster home to a group home, and they funneled me into the juvenile justice system. And I stayed in there for about 4.5 years while I was growing up, through what was really a developmental phase for me, and most people kind of start to find themselves.
Like, at what age was this, my brother?
Um, 12, I went into like a lockdown
Mm-hmm.
group home, and from there, they transitioned me right into like the juvenile justice facilities. So it's like a level 8
Mm-hmm.
facility, and then kind of level 10. And for most people, those turn out to be, like 12 to 18-month programs. But for me, it ended up being 4 years, because I was someone who was a ward of the state at that time, and it was easier, I believe, for the state to have me in those lockdown facilities where they didn't have to worry about placing me or providing resources, or even dealing with some of the challenges that I may have
Wow.
had.
Hold on 1 second. So you said typically at that stage, the typical stay for most juveniles is, 18 months. But because, you were at the time a ward of the state, it seemed that it was easier basically just to keep you in that situation as opposed to having to deal with the other challenges that were,
Right.
Wow.
Right. And so what happened while I was in there,
Hey, speak up a little bit, man. Your voice is getting a little low. Can you talk up a little bit?
sure.
Okay. Okay.
Is it a little better?
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. And so what would happen while I was in there, of course, things like fights and stuff would result in criminal charges. And so they started to sentence me as an adult for those charges, and they'll pull me out, put me in the adult jails, the local county jails, and things like that. And so I kind of started to build a criminal record that became an adult arrest record as a juvenile inside of those facilities.
Mm.
Yeah. And I stayed there for about 4 years, and it was really challenging for me because of course, I was the ward of state. I had my grandparents who at one point, or my grandmother who at one point was trying to maneuver through the system and of foster care and those parenting courses that were required in order to have me come and stay with her. But while that was happening, she passed away while I was inside of that facility.
Mm.
And my mom was on drugs, and my father was pretty absent. I mean, I knew who he was, I knew where he was, but he was not really taking care of us. And so what happened was started to get an adult arrest record, and then they started to push me into another facility, and from there I stayed, like I said, about 4 years. And I tried to get out of there, and because of the different charges and stuff, and I had like case managers from the state because I was in foster care, but they would always kind of return with you like different information that really just let me know that I was going to be stuck inside of that facility. And as I continue to kind of have fights, or I'll get charged with things like inciting a riot or something like that, anything kind of could happen inside of there in regards to offenses that would result in additional time inside.
Mm.
And to the point that I had, I think I was like 16, and they started to go through a process to transfer me from that facility to a youthful offender prison, where I would have been until I was 21. And and so at that time, although I had some challenges, I mean, I was diagnosed with all kind of stuff. Some of them, of course, was misdiagnosis, but I was diagnosed with all kind of stuff. And what I found was that there was really no effort to address like mental health challenges that I was experiencing, or just me as an individual understanding that I was going through a developmental process right before the eyes of every out of that facility.
Hold on 1 second. You mentioned like the diagnoses and all of that stuff. Did all of that happen while you were incarcerated, or was?
No, it happened when I was younger. I think like as early as I can kind of remember, when I was in the elementary school and stuff like that, I had these different diagnoses. But at that point, it wasn't like manic depressive; it was like bipolar and HD and different things like that. And so I was diagnosed with that stuff when I was a child, and I didn't really like receive. I was just given medication, stuff that would have walking around like a zombie, man.
Wow!
But it had me walking around being out of touch from everything and everybody, and I never really understood that there was definitely alternatives to that medication that should have been made available until like a much later age. Yeah. So,
and I'll tell you what's interesting about that, because that was just before you also were in and out of the foster care system. And so from the standpoint of advocacy, and fellas, I want you to pay attention to this, man. And just from the standpoint of, there are scenarios in which young brothers and sisters are in situations in which they don't have advocates, right? And again, this will lead into what we're talking about later with Chainless Change that, that Mark has created and is definitely working and making a difference down in Florida. But the reality of having an advocate, we start, like I mentioned before about shout outs, is about your village. And we need that. Like what you just mentioned there, from the standpoint of there were alternatives, and you learned later that there were alternatives to what was prescribed to you or what was given to you. And had you had an advocate at that point, those alternatives would have been made real. But because that advocacy point or that advocacy was not there or not in place, that made that challenging. And therefore you were just given what you were given, and you had to figure it out. And so, fellas, the importance of advocating for those who might not be able to advocate for themselves, pay attention to that. Pay attention to that, whether it's in your own family, whether it's your own neighbor, whether it's somebody you don't really know. If you have the capacity and the ability to advocate for someone that maybe can't advocate for themselves, they need you. All right. Now, I didn't want to, I just had to point that out, man, in the middle of your story.
No, I completely agree with that. I can identify several points throughout my life where if there was just someone who was there in the space operating as an advocate, that there would have been quite a few different outcomes. Quite a few different outcomes, whether it was, me entering into the foster care space, or me entering into those institutions, or being in school and, being placed in a special education class and being identified as slow. If there was someone who kind of understood those systems and used their voice in a way that would help ensure that my best interest was looked out for, I think that for certain that there could have been a lot of different outcomes. In fact, it was advocacy that, which we'll get there, that helped me get out of the situation from being transferred from facility and then going to a youthful offender prison until I was 21 years old. And that was the one point that I did, manage to get into contact with someone who took a special interest in my experience and understood and used their voice to be an advocate for me. But I do think that it is really important that if there's an opportunity to be an advocate for people who are disenfranchised or just unfortunate or even not even informed, that you should definitely take a second to use your voice and your knowledge to influence a better outcome for them if you can.
And use your voice, use your knowledge. But fellas, everybody doesn't have a voice and you might not have a knowledge, but maybe you can write a check. Use your resources. Yeah. Use what you have to make a difference. And that's something that I think we all need to be mindful of, because we're all gifted with different things. There are some people that have more time than money, so they volunteer, they give their time, they use their time to do it. There are some people that have a whole hell of a lot more money than they do time, so they financially support. I was listening to or watching an interview. It's a guy named H.J. Russell, and he was literally one of the largest African-American construction. He hailed one of the largest African-American construction companies, and it was based out of Atlanta. And I was reading an interview that he had done. I forgot what magazine it was in. But long story short, he came into prominence during the civil rights movement. And they asked H.J. Russell in this interview, you came into prominence in Atlanta with this construction company during the civil rights movement, but we don't really see your name listed in regards to the Martin Luther Kings and all of that. And in that interview, he responded and he said, I had a chance to meet Martin Luther King during the civil rights struggle, and Dr. King learned who I was and what I was doing. And he said, Dr. King told him that I need to keep you in the background because you have the resources to bond out hundreds of us. So we need to keep you in the background. So right. Long story short, his role was to be in the background and to do his thing, but he could financially support, whereas you have others on the front line. There are different ways to advocate. Figure out the way that you use your gifts and your skills wisely. Do that and do that well. But no matter what, do something.
Right. Agreed. And, even like to bring it to something a little more modern, even with the Meek Mill situation.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of different people. Of course, that was a high profile case, but there were a lot of different people who used their voice and their advocacy in different ways to ensure that he had a different outcome. And had that not happened, it's likely that what happened to him would have been the same as what happens to hundreds of thousands of people across the country. Someone who entered into the system and at 18, 19 years old. And that thing went on for like 12 years. And he continued to have those challenges and be caught into the grips of the criminal system for over a decade. And it was at a point where people started to use their voice and
Dude, I that's extremely powerful. And fellas, I hope you're paying attention. The importance of having an advocate, but then the importance of being an advocate when you have the capacity to do so. It's not a choice. It's actually a responsibility. Again, Mark just mentioned some of the outcomes in his life could have been totally different if he had had an advocate at these various stages. Fellas, it is incumbent upon you to be that advocate for somebody else. It's not a choice. It's not something you want to do. It's something that you have to do. And so you also mentioned that once you kind of learned a little bit about advocacy and you connected with some folks, that literally is what led to you getting out of the system and kind of getting out of the system. Talk to us a little bit about that scenario, man.
Yeah, so what happened, because I was in there for such a long time, I went to school like year round. I graduated when I was 15 while I was in that facility. And so I was like responsible for doing like a community newsletter, creating a newsletter for the facility and like weekly devotionals and stuff and having that distributed around the campus. But I also was like doing some like mentorship of sorts inside of there. And it was during that phase that I found out how to complete like potions and different things like that to get the court's attention. And so that's kind of what I started to work on because I felt that I never would really be heard. I knew I wanted to be out and I knew that I was stuck in there because I really didn't have a place to go. support system, because if I had one, that there were people who would have been able to come and intervene and create some kind of transition plan for me so that I could transition from there back to the community. And I knew for certain that that wasn't happening with those caseworkers or people who were responsible for me at the state level, like with the child care agencies. And so I got into some more trouble and they're like fighting and things like that. And there was an incident where I had a altercation with a officer and they charged me again, and they charged me as an adult for that at 15. They charged me for an adult for like aggravated assault, not to mention he assaulted me first. But
Wow.
that happens over and over again. Again, that's something that's not unique to me. Um, but what happened was I was adjudicated or direct filed, and they started to treat me as an adult. I went to the county jail from that facility, and they were working to transfer me out to a YO camp, which was a youthful offender prison where I would stay until I was 21 years old. So for me, I started to understand that, I went in at 12 and now it was going to be about a 9 year span of me being incarcerated just because I didn't really have resources or an advocate or any kind of support from there. Because I, even in that facility, saw people coming in and out, in and out.
Mm-hmm.
They stayed in a time that they were sentenced to, they'd go. But of course, if you make a mistake, there were people who received grace for different things because they had a support system, someone that was involved in their process. But that didn't happen for me. And so when I got arrested from inside of there for having that fight and was charged as an adult, they started to sentence me. They planned to transfer me out and sentence me to go into another facility until I was 21. But before taking me to that facility, they had to take me back to that place to kind of wait for the transfer to happen. And I decided, while I was there, that I would try to get some kind of mercy, try to get my voice heard, and because I understood what was happening. And I knew that, what was happening really wasn't right, and it wasn't happening to a lot of other people who had similar situations just because of their support system. And so I started to find out how to write motions to the courts, and I would send those things in, and they would be kicked back out. And I didn't realize it was because we were using outdated law books and stuff like that. It didn't have, accurate statutes. So there was really no grounds to have that stuff considered. I would write to, those administrators for the program. I went through like grievance processes and all kind of stuff to try to get some attention, but at no point would anyone hear my voice.
Question. How did you learn about that? Like, how did you learn how to even write motions? Because you said, at the time you were 15, 16. How did you even learn to do that?
Well, like I said, I graduated in there when I was 15, so I had a lot of time, and they would try to occupy that time by giving me different books and different assignments to distribute and write stuff for the facility at large. And that was something that was particularly interesting for me because I knew that it could possibly help me change my own situation. So I started to make efforts to learn how to draft those things and figure out the proper ways to send them in. I hadn't mastered it at that,
Uh-huh.
of course, but I was definitely taking several stabs at it, none of which were successful.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And so take it a step further, because when you and I talked before, you mentioned that you took action, which basically led you to getting to where you wanted to go, and talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't, I wasn't heard. And so I knew that I'd reached this point where they were within 21 days of transferring me to the YO camp because they move you from one dorm to the next. While you're during that process, and it's a more secure dorm, you're there, 23 hours a day, locked down and those types of things. And so what I did during that time was I figured since the judge isn't hearing me, the administrators aren't hearing me, those case managers, aren't hearing me. I don't have any family who's going to speak up for me, that I would escape. And so what I did was I escaped from that facility, not with the intentions of getting away or going anywhere else, to, be on the run or anything like that. I escaped from that facility with the intentions of being able to get in front of the courts so that I could be heard and have my case reevaluated and possibly modified.
Hold on. So your whole goal was to escape, to get caught, so that you could then be heard by the judge.
Yeah, that was exactly what my whole goal was.
And how did you, again, I mean, I'm always fascinated by this. Again, I mean, how did you come up with this particular plan to know that, hey, if I escape and get caught, I will then get in front of the judge? Like, where did this particular thought process come from?
Well, I saw some people before, like maybe 2 months before I kind of had my experience. They left and they escaped, but they did it in a crazy way, like choked somebody, ran down the gate, something like that. But for me, I saw that they went they went to the county jails once they were caught, and then they were released in its entirely after like 3 months, something like that, and they didn't have to return. I also knew again that they were people who would have had someone showing up for them at court and different things like that, so that their outcomes would have been a little bit different than mine potentially would have been. However, I knew that it was worth a shot because the way that the system worked in Florida is that the only one who would have been able to stop that transfer that I was about to experience would have been the courts that had jurisdiction of me. Had jurisdiction of me was the county that I was arrested in, and that's where no one would hear me. So I needed for the local court in that county where that facility was in to now get jurisdiction, and so that's what happened when I escaped.
Dude, I'm gonna tell you, when I'm hearing the logic and the theory and everything that you kind of utilize to get where you were ultimately trying to go, that was freaking brilliant. Like, I mean, just to be honest, that was brilliant. Just the whole notion of you watched and you saw that people who tried to escape, now they weren't trying to escape to get in front of a judge, but they escaped, and that led them to a scenario that might have been favorable to you based on your personal circumstances. You thought about it and you're like, you know what? I can replicate that, but I'm not doing that to get away and be on the run. I'm doing that so that I then get seen by the judge, who would not hear my request, who would not read my motions because I was using, outdated formats or whatnot through the law books and the things that I had read while I was in. That was brilliant. And just the thought process of being able to do that and having the time to think, like, that also, to me, I mean, taking it, and this is a little bit different, it highlights what we're capable of if we're given the time to really think about a situation. Like, what you thought about there, if that thought process, that strategery were redirected into something, which you're doing now with Chainless Change, but if that were redirected into something constructive, dude, you're a world changer. Now, you're a world changer with Chainless Change, but in regards to just being able to think about that, I'm just like, how the possibilities are endless, man. That's amazing to me.
But, I felt like at that point, I kind of learned a lot while exhausted all of my options. So after kind of trying all of those alternatives and getting nowhere, that was what I figured was the last and possibly the best alternatives for the results that I wanted. Really, I just kind of wanted to go home. And even though at that point, I didn't even have a place to identify as home, I knew that I wanted to leave out of those facilities.
You just wanted to leave.
I didn't want to transfer. I ran, like at 12, I didn't want to go and be somewhere until I was 21. And I think at this point, I was like 17 years old. Anyways, my grandparents and stuff were gone. There wasn't real relationships with my parents. They were still kind of on drugs and stuff. So I didn't really have an idea of where I was going or what the outcome would have been beyond that facility, but I never experienced life as like growing up beyond that facility. Like, I literally grew up in there. I am kind of like a son of the system.
And so I guess, so fast forward to you getting out and moving into creating Chainless Change. Talk to us about that process.
Well, I just kind of recall a lot of the challenges that I had with navigating the space, the reentry space, or trying to become reacclimated with the community after leaving there. Um, and so that's kind of what led to me creating the organization to what it is now. But it actually started with me assisting people with getting their driver's licenses.
Say that again. Speak up. I couldn't hear you. Say it again.
It actually started with me assisting people who had court costs and fines that were preventing them from being able to have driver's license in Florida.
Mm.
And, what happens here is because we have a cash generating court system. If someone has a criminal offense, they have a ton of fines that come along, whether they're found guilty or not guilty. There's a ton of fines that they become responsible for having an encounter with the criminal system. And so oftentimes for a lot of people who can't pay those fines, their license are suspended, and then those fines are sent over to a collections agency where it accrues a lot of interest.
Mm.
But what a lot of people aren't aware of is that you are entitled to like a 2% payment plan if you can't afford to pay those fines, those court costs, or legal financial obligations, or you're entitled to have them converted to a community service hours so that you can work those off, and they'll convert it at a rate. It varies from county to county. There's no real format here.
Mm-hmm.
For the conversion rate, but you are entitled to have them converted in most cases. And even for some people who are indigent, they can have them wait completely. But a lot of people don't know that. So what they'll do is continue. They'll either live without driver's license for years, which is something that I did until I started to look into it, or they will have to. Or they'll start to pay those fines, but it takes years and years sometimes to pay those fines, because once you have an encounter with the criminal justice system, more than likely you're going to be working a low-paying job, and it's difficult to even make much less, pay $2,000 or $3,000 of court fines that aren't going to help you sleep, keep a roof over your head at night.
Absolutely.
So it's a lot of things. Right. It's a lot of things that prevent people from being able to pay any of those legal financial obligations. But those obligations have a huge impact on your life. And if you have your driver's license suspended down here in Florida, you're handicapped because everyone is required to have transportation for the most part to be able to even maintain a job. There's poor public transportation system or little public transportation systems here that will be able to get you to where you need to go.
So you basically, one of the first things after you got out, and based on your personal experiences, and once you understood that there are ways to get around, this issue in regards to getting your license restored and all of that, you basically learned the system there. And Chainless Change initially started with you focusing on helping, guys and ladies who were formerly incarcerated get their license back, utilizing some of the resources that are currently available.
Right. Yeah, and it wasn't necessarily formerly incarcerated. It could have been anyone that just had a brush in or an arrest, whether found guilty, didn't go to jail, bonded out. There's still court fees. I think that's important to kind of just point out, whether or not they've been arrested or been found guilty, they're still responsible for those court fees because they had an issue or that resulted in an encounter with the justice system. That's how municipalities in the state is funded here through that cash generating system. And so, yeah, and so it actually didn't start with like Chainless Change. I called it like the Proof Clinic, and it was pursuing restoration, overcoming obstacles for our future.
I like that. You say you call it the Proof Clinic?
Correct.
I love that. You said, and what does the acronym stand for again?
It's pursuing restoration and overcoming obstacles for our future.
I love that.
And so I would create motions for people to file pro se so that they could be advocates for themselves And it was just, it's really simple. You just have to, know how to create the motion. And a lot of people don't know that part. But once you have the proper format and you're using the proper statutes, then you're required then the court's required to respond to you.
Mm.
Sometimes it's a no, but they're required to respond to you. I started to work on concealing expungement things, stuff that I had to do for myself. I started to do for other people. And so it didn't start off as like an organization focused on reentry. It was just addressing those particular issues.
So it just started with the work.
Those particular issues.
You started with the work. You started with the work and turned it into an organization. But it's personal because these are things that you experienced.
Everything is something that I experienced. So what happened was I was volunteering with quite a few organizations here. A lot wouldn't allow me to volunteer because I had a criminal background. But there were a lot of reentry organizations that I kind of worked in some kind of way with them. And I realized that there was a lot of emphasis on workforce development, sometimes vocational training, but everyone's answers to reentry for the most part would be get a job, get a job, get a job. And that's not really the answer because I experienced that myself. And I knew that coming back into society, that transition for me required me becoming reacclimated with technology that didn't exist in the way that it did when I was incarcerated. I had to figure out housing, and even, me leaving at 17, 18 years old, I had to deal with the housing challenges when I didn't have any kind of income or support system. I knew that was something that existed for other people. There's a lot of stigmatization resulting in the criminal background component that may have caused damaged relationships with families. And so I think that, family reunification is something that should be addressed as a priority. And there's a lot of things that contribute to someone being incarcerated or someone being successfully re-entering the community felt like wasn't being addressed.
Dude, I'm gonna tell you, it's interesting. Everybody talks about, or a lot of times, like in business or in entrepreneurship, people criticize at times, especially like Black folks, always asking for a seat at the table, asking for a seat at the table, asking for a seat at the table. A lot of folks now are just like, forget asking for a seat at the table. Let's learn how to build our own table. And when you were talking about the whole concept of you wanted to volunteer, you wanted to do things, but because of your criminal background, you weren't afforded the opportunity at times to volunteer because, you got to check that little box, right? And again, think about that, to volunteer. It's not about, we want you to come and pay you this high salary, super government, high, clearance type position. No, I want to volunteer. You weren't even afforded the opportunity to volunteer because of your background. But what's interesting, that's ironic. I want to just give. Like, dude, all I want to do is help. You won't even let me help because I checked that box, right? But it makes me go back to that concept of, instead of asking for a seat at the table, we build the table. Hence the fact that you built Chainless Change.
Right. I think it's important to have both, though, the seat at the table and builders building that table.
Explain.
Because having a seat at the table is extremely important, because for me, that means that there are legislators that have voice. And those are the people who create policies and legislation that creates budgets and funds projects that have a direct impact on you and your daily life, but also building the table because you can do the work in your community or do the work that that's needed to make the change that you want to see. And I think that both of those types of people have to exist in order to effectively have change or create change that we want to see. For example, I'm doing, the work that I'm doing in this space, but there needs to be someone that has that voice or that seat at the table who comes up and says discriminatory housing practices are no longer something that we're going to allow. In Florida, if you have a criminal record of felony, you can't go through any of the affordable housing options here any of the HOAs here. So what happens is that people who are already making a minimum wage job, having a hard time finding housing, really have little to no options. You'll have the opportunity. Some will have the opportunity to seek out housing options with private landlords and things of that sort. But at that point, you have to pay three times the rent, first, last, security. If you're already having a deficit with getting from month to month, because your background prevents you from a job with a livable wage, then what's the likelihood of being able to find affordable housing or afford to pay those type of moving expenses for housing, and not having access to affordable housing is something that immediately will have an impact on public safety and recidivism. Because if you don't have a place to live, which is why housing first practices are important, if you don't have a place to live, how can you focus on the job? How can you reunite with your family? That's one of the key elements to stability.
And it's something there. When I think about the concept of survival versus surviving and thriving, right? They're two different things, and sometimes some of us approach it from a place of arrogance, meaning we're asking people to thrive when they're worried about surviving, right? Like if you don't have survival intact or basically there, how can I ask you to go and thrive? You know what I'm saying? And so to your point, when you mentioned housing, I think that is, that's one of those, like the Maslow's law of hierarchy type deals. One of the things that you need, to basically survive. Then we can talk about thriving and excelling and becoming your best self.
Right.
But you need that foundation in place.
Absolutely. And I think that notion is definitely magnified as it pertains to people who are just as involved or that are trying to re-enter into the community and have a successful transition, because there's expectations that everyone, after they have been sentenced and they serve their sentence, are able to re-enter the community and be a model citizen. However, people are entering into those systems with trauma that hasn't been addressed, deaths that haven't been addressed, mental health challenges that haven't been addressed for oftentimes their entire life. They go into that facility and it still isn't addressed. But there's an expectation that they'll come out a different person. And I think that that's completely unrealistic. And so even for those people, survival is, contingent upon them having access to those basic needs that you were mentioning. And if they haven't been able to overcome a lot of the obstacles and challenges that they were having that resulted in them being in there, their likelihood to recidivate after leaving those institutions just to survive is a lot higher than someone who has gone through that treatment and truly has received some kind of programming to ensure that they were rehabilitated and that the transition for them was a little smoother.
Man, this thing is so much deeper than just, stay out of trouble when you leave. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's so much deeper than that. And that's why, I'm thankful for brothers like yourself who are really committed to making a difference in regards to identifying these holes and filling these holes so that there is a higher likelihood that folks who do leave these scenarios and situations, get survival, in check, but then have the capacity and the opportunity to potentially thrive going forward.
Right.
And so I applaud you and I appreciate you. And I mean, thinking about that, talk to us a little bit specifically about Chainless Change, the organization that you created in Florida.
So Chainless Change, of course, we have the Proof Clinic, which was what we started with. And then there are other initiatives to assist people, like we have a program called Help, and it's basically just to be able to provide some of those basic necessities that people need when they are re-entering into society, like transportation. You can't have a job without transportation. There's a lot of people who are doing the workforce thing, but you can't get to an interview without transportation. How can you get to an interview without clothing, proper or professional attire? No one's going to look at you if you come in with what you left out there with or what you may have on hand. You're not even going to be able to get past that interview. A lot of people need assistance with just knowing how to complete those applications and how to present themselves so that they're given an opportunity like resumes. There's a
Hmm.
gap for many on resumes, or they're using a format that isn't really something that stands out to what those to the employers that they are trying to get in front of. And so we have a initiative that kind of focuses on helping people with that transition process in itself. And I mean, there's like some basic things, like you said, survival that people need, like clothing and undergarments and hygiene products and transportation. Some people, food, when they leave out, um, there's food stamps for people who are, for most people, but there's a waiting period. And what do you do during that waiting period if you don't have
Mm.
food to eat? You can't wait 2 weeks to eat.
That's right.
How do you
Wow.
how do you get food or if you don't have money and you don't have a job? That increases the likelihood.
And compound that to your story in a sense of you're also there are some that don't have that support system that you're coming out to either.
Right,
So
right.
for some, if you have that 2 week period and maybe you have some family that you can
Mhm.
go and kind of crash with for a couple weeks and feed you and keep you basically give you a roof over your head, so to speak. But if you don't have that and you got that gap, what do you do?
Right, and I think for a lot of people, they don't have that support system. So it's often, what do you do? And we'll find people who are leaving out and have absolutely no idea what their first step is, or where they're going to get their first meal or their first shirt to put on,
Hmm.
how they're going to get a ride to even start to look for jobs or a haircut to make themselves presentable. Something as basic as a shower, man, to wash the prison off of you or the incarceration off of you. And so it's a lot of little things that we're trying to provide that assistance with for people.
Brother, I'm gonna tell you, man, this you're doing some powerful work, man. And you're doing powerful work and it is necessary. And because of your experiences, you saw it firsthand. And so you now have a firsthand look at what is really needed. It's not like somebody from the outside looking in from a bird's eye view perspective. You're like, no, this is what's up. That's not what's up. And you can literally attack it and approach it from a very tangible place in which is needed. And and again, I'm gonna say this again, I applaud and I appreciate you. And one of the things that really stood out to me was in our previous conversation. You shared with me, and this really it really spoke to my heart because it showed your authenticity, but then it also showed the level of principle that you operate with. You mentioned to me that with Chainless Change, raising money and funding, like with any scenario or organization, that's always a challenge. But you said that you
Yeah,
had
for
two
sure.
sources that came to you that were willing to support you and open up opportunities, or a grant in another scenario with an organization. But the thing is, you were very skeptical of aligning yourself with those two organizations because they did not completely align with the mission. Talk to us a little bit about principle, holding to your principle, and making sure that you stay aligned with your mission as you accomplish something.
Right. Well, yeah, our situation is a bit unique because it's an organization. Of course, I'm someone who have a conviction and was formerly incarcerated. And the whole idea is to be able to provide support and create opportunities for people who are formerly incarcerated or just have a criminal justice involvement in any sense. And so I think that one of the ways to have the greatest impact is to create opportunities and to create sustainable opportunities where you're able to create jobs for those people and truly be able to allow them to operate in a space that will be transformative for them. And so we have this initiative called the Circle that's focused on providing peer support and um, resource navigation for people who are justice involved. And are you familiar with the peer support?
No, I'm not. Break it down to me. Break it
Okay.
down for me.
Well. Peer support is pretty much where someone who has had a lived experience, such as incarceration or a mental health challenge or substance use disorder, and they've successfully been able to overcome and maintain wellness from those experiences. They use their lived experiences and their story and their expertise of navigating through that space to assist others who are currently living in those challenges right now. Like, for example, with me being someone formerly incarcerated, I would be considered a forensic peer support specialist and most effective in a space where I'm assisting someone who's transitioning from incarceration,
Absolutely.
so that they're able to successfully navigate through that, overcome those challenges, and then help someone else. It's all about helping someone so they can help someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And so peer support is something that's widely accepted in the mental health space at right now. It's a trend rather in the mental health space, although it's something that's definitely needed. And because no one should be making decisions about you and your wellness besides, well, you.
Mm-hmm.
People can offer advice, and people can offer input, but you want someone who has that experience dealing with to help you navigate through it.
Absolutely.
With challenges, as opposed to a professional who has tons of degrees making decisions that impact your everyday life. So that's the whole concept behind peer support. And we created a program to provide that. And we had an opportunity to get funding for that component of the organization. And I'm not an experienced grant writer or anything like that. And, we have people who are working in our space who are not people who have those type of backgrounds as much either. We're all new to this profit thing.
Yeah.
We're just doing the work. And so we had someone help us out with writing a grant for us to receive funding for that program, not knowing that those requirements was that we wouldn't be able to hire anyone under that funding that could not pass a level 2 background check. So what that meant was that anyone who had a felony would not be able to work under that program. So we would have had to hire people from outside of the organization that were not as invested or connected to our mission to be able to maintain that funding. Even myself, I actually haven't received a salary since I started this, but even myself, I wouldn't have been able to hire because I had a criminal background. And for me, that was so out of touch with our mission that was something that we just couldn't accept.
Fellas, pay attention to what he said there. A lot of times the mindset that we tend to adopt is go get that bag. Go get that bag by any means necessary. Go get that bag. Whatever I got to do, go get that bag, right? Listen to what Mark just said. There was an opportunity for him to go and get funding for a major component of his organization, Chainless Change. But what he ended up having to do was walk away from that because the criteria meant that he would not then be able to utilize the individuals that he wanted to utilize to serve those in need. And that was completely not in line with his principle or in line with his mission.
Yeah, and I think if you start to chase money and abandon your mission, then there is no point in having an organization that...
Ooh, stop right there. Just say what you just said one more time.
Yeah, if you chase money and you abandon your mission, then there's no point in providing any services.
Dude, fellas, that in itself, that one line is probably worth this whole conversation. If you start chasing money and you abandon your mission, what's the point of you providing any services to begin with? You got to be mission focused. If you don't get anything from Mark's story, you can see that this brother is mission focused. And and there was another scenario that he mentioned. There was another organization that wanted to fund and support him. And we're not going to mention the name of the organization, but he also had to, step away from that as well because he did not see a strategic alignment in regard to what they're saying versus what you're doing. And talk to us a little bit about that as well, man.
It's funny you say strategic alignment. Really, man, there's no real alignment there. They just got the bags. Is what you. But they actually emailed me again this morning too. And what it is that it's an organization who has very conservative values. They have a history of practices that are not in line with truly supporting our communities on a much deeper level. And so there are people who have seats at the table in a lot of ways, and they don't use their seats to benefit us at all. But they also have a organization that does some things in the community, which is how they use their voice in a way by creating, financial literacy courses and just different types of programming. And they came to me, reached out to me a couple of times because I have an invested interest in occupational licensing or removing barriers to occupational licensing, because that's a huge thing that not only impacts people who are just as involved, but just our community in general. And that's a whole nother conversation.
Definitely.
But that group had reached out and offered to fund different initiatives. Like we have about 7 different initiatives that they offered to fund or partially fund 3 of them. And looking at it, I could see what on the surface level, how that would benefit us immediately. But I also understood that they were an organization that had seats at the table. And when they started to use their voice while they sat at the table, that the things that they were advocates of or the stuff that policies that they suggested and supported were not things that were productive or able to benefit our community at large. And so although it would have had an immediate impact and been able to help us out, and it would have gave them an opportunity to have immediate access to us, while they didn't even have principles and practices that were truly in support of our development.
Dude, fellas, again, I know ladies are listening to hear the conviction that this brother is coming with, the principle that he's operating with. There were opportunities for people to come with the bag, and we're not dropping the names of the scenarios here because, but the places that he's talking about, the organizations that he's talking about got deep pockets, like deep pockets. But he chose not to strategically align because, yes, on the surface, it looks good. But, when you think about the surface, you have to think about an iceberg, right? 80 to 90% of the iceberg's mass lies beneath the surface. Yeah, you see it. You're like, okay, this is not that big of a deal. Shoot, when you look at the Titanic, it wasn't what was seen above the water. What punctured the Titanic was that stuff under the water. And so having that wherewithal, having that discernment, like, I don't know what your background and spiritual beliefs and stuff are, but for me, I look at life from the perspective of I always ask God for discernment in my decision making, in my alignments. I'm not perfect. I still make mistakes, but literally every day I ask for the spirit of discernment. It's like, dude, God, allow me to have discernment. If it's the right opportunity, allow the door to fly open. If it's not, I want the door to be shut. I want it to be nailed, and I want the key to get into it to be thrown away or buried somewhere where I have no access to it. I want personally, this is just me speaking about myself, my spiritual beliefs and everything. The spirit of discernment is what I want. And sometimes that discernment is not what you see on the surface. It's what's deeper than that. And so when you ask for that, or when you seek that, or when you operate with that, it's a lot of times deeper than the surface, because most folks are going to hear that and they're going to be like, man, shoot, you should have found a way to work with them and get that bag, player. But the reality is, your spirit of discernment realized that it looks good, but what looks good ain't necessarily good for you.
Right. And there was a little skepticism even when I started to get those phone calls and emails, because I'm like, is this real? Like, if it's real, don't call me, email me from your email that ends with, this organization. And so they started to email, and we went back and forth. And then I kind of was, wondering, I know they saw some articles and stuff about me, but I just couldn't really identify, why are you interested here when when you have an opportunity to make true structural change, you don't do that.
You know, that's dude. I'm gonna tell you what's so crazy about that. When you're talking, I'm sitting here thinking about it. I'm like, they have the resources, the influence, the capacity to do everything that you're doing times 1,000 if they wanted to. So why is it that you just don't go ahead and do that? Why is it, and so then from the standpoint of reverse engineering it, you start to think about, okay, are you trying to create me as a face of, or as an agent? I'm using air quotes here if you're watching the video, an agent of this thing. And then we have this face that looks appealing, that is that speaks the language that people can identify with, but we're using this agent to covertly go in and do something else. And so, dude, I'm gonna be honest with you, man. The level of discernment and thought process that you have there, man, it's amazing and it's off the charts. And truthfully, I yearn to have that level of discernment in my interactions on a regular basis, because that's powerful, brother.
Yeah, I think it's extremely important to, look at someone's track record in their history, and how you were saying earlier, that there should be people creating the table, and some people who have a seat at the table. Those are people who have seats at the table, and they also have the resources to create the table, and neither one of those tables benefit us in turn. And so even like in our conversations, they would identify other people who I was familiar with that they supported in different ways. And I would look at that and be like, oh, that's how they got that funded. Well, I'm just not going to be one of those guys if that remains that I won't be able to perform or at my full capacity in this season. Then so be it. I won't do it by aligning with people who are not truly driven by the mission that I'm in support of, and who are truly going to use their power and their resources to make sustainable change in our community. And they clearly don't have practices or beliefs or support any kind of policy on a much deeper level that is beneficial to our community at all. Yeah, and so even though we'll see them, on the surface level, like that iceberg that you mentioned, on the surface level, it looks good. Hey, we're doing this, but what are you really doing when up below the iceberg? What are you really doing below the surface, rather?
Dude, check this out, man. I mean, we finna throw this thing out here. So, is there anybody or any organization that you personally would love to partner with, connect with, to whatever? Because what's interesting about when you do media, when you do podcasts, when you put stuff on YouTube, randomly, I mean, I've had some folks in my DM that I'm like, dang, dude, how many million folks follow you on this? And, and you giving me a thumbs up saying you like this episode or whatever. What I'm saying is there anybody or any group that you would love to, with Chainless Change, connect with? Again, moonshot, closed mouths don't get fed. Is there anybody that you would love to connect with?
Man, one group that I really, really think does really powerful work in this space is the Fortune Society. Are you up in New York?
No, I'm not familiar.
The research, Fortune. Yep, the Fortune Society, and they're driven by the same mission. They have so many resources in making an impact on such a large scale. That is truly, truly amazing. But even within, this space, I'm willing and interested in connecting with people who are truly mission driven and willing to have an impact that's sustainable and contribute in any way to ensuring that we're able to provide resources. I mean, right now I'm working on putting together a local festival of sorts so that we can generate some resources and some revenue to continue to be able to provide services to people.
Now, question. You said the Fortune Society, and they're out of New York?
Yeah, it's the Fortune Society.
Hey, look, so hold on. Look, we put this thing out here. So fellas and ladies listening, if there's somebody in New York or somebody who's connected to the Fortune Society, literally connect the dots and put them in contact, or let them hear this episode and then put them in contact with Mark Mitchell out of Florida, the creator of Chainless Change Inc. Now, and what's the contact info for Chainless Change?
Chainless Change, we can be reached at 954-395-2961. Or email at info chainless, that's chain like on your neck, CHANLESS, change, CHANGE, at info at chainlesschange.org.
Okay.
Where they can contact us, or by phone. We also have Instagram, which is chainless_change, as well as Facebook, which is chainless_change. But I do want to add that we want to do a local festival that highlights that highlights breaking away from the stereotypes associated with mental health and criminal justice or arrest records. And if there are even artists who are willing to come down and support in any way, that would be something that's extremely appreciated. We just want to bring awareness and also provide resources so that we can do anything that we can to support people who are having these challenges.
And is there a website as well?
Yeah, it's www.chainlesschange.org. And we also have these really cool shirts here. I don't know if you can see this, but these really cool shirts that have a lot of positive messaging on it that we use to sell those, and they're on our website. And we sell those, and we use the proceeds to continue to provide resources to people. Like something as small as a hygiene bag or a plain white shirt and black pants is life-changing to people who are re-entering into our community.
Dude, and so fellas and ladies listening, literally, for one, if you're connected with the Fortune Society, connect them with Chainless Change and connect them with Mark Mitchell. All the contact info is going to be in the show notes. That's one. But then, fellas and sisters and anybody, I don't care who you are, if you're listening to this, we got to get behind this brother, and we got to make sure that he wins and wins big, pushing his initiative. He's coming from the right place. His heart's in the right place. He's been there, but then he's out there doing the work. He's on the ground doing the work. And a lot of times issues or scenarios don't necessarily get to where they're going because of lack of funding and lack of support. So I'm asking everybody out there to go to chainlesschange.org, follow on Instagram, chainless_change on Instagram and Facebook, email info@chainlesschange.org, go and donate. Connect him with various scenarios that are coming from the right place, because he ain't going to align with any and everybody. But let's get this thing going. And he's currently serving the state of Florida. So he's right now doing all of this work in the state of Florida. The state of Florida is like the fourth most populous state in the country.
Yeah. But the state of Florida is also one of the most challenging states for people who have arrest records. Also, there's 1,000. There's a website that's the National Registry of Collateral Consequences, and there's like 1,003 collateral consequences in Florida associated with having an arrest record.
Wow.
So it's tough. It's tough out here re-entering into Florida.
Wow. So look, so folks that are listening, I mean, please get out and support Mark Mitchell. If you're an artist, connect with him. If you want to come down and he's looking to put together an event to basically highlight some of this and to generate revenue. But the biggest thing is we need to make sure the brother has wind beneath his wings to help push forward, because there are a lot of people who are challenged in regards to having a situation that, they're dealing with, but they need help reintegrating back into society successfully. It's not about just getting back. It's doing so successfully. Because again, I'm going to be honest with you. I did an episode a while ago, and it might have been a year and a half ago. And it was one of those little quick snippets where I'll just drop the wisdom moment. But the whole title was I Am Them. And what I wanted to highlight was the fact that I am them. Yes, I might not have gotten caught. But I did the same things that other folks got caught doing. There might have been a time in which I had a few too many to drink. I was just blessed to make it home, or I was blessed to not run over a curb or hit something. We've all done things that doesn't make us any better or worse than anybody else, but maybe you were just blessed to have not been caught by doing that. And so therefore, I am them. So we're all, it's like the humanity is there in all of us. And so just because they got caught and I didn't, I'm able to go on and live my life. But the reality is there are some that did the same doggone thing. They just happened to hit a DUI checkpoint that night. And I happened to make a right and not a left. And my life has been totally different. So when you start thinking about it on that level, you realize that everybody deserves a shot. Everybody deserves a chance. And especially if you're doing the right doggone thing, support this thing to help people get back and do what they're supposed to do, because we all need it.
Yeah, and I think that you're right, that I am them is extremely important, because there's so many little low level and innocuous things that are considered criminal offenses, like loitering. You know? Oh man, it's just so many.
Dude, let me tell you what's crazy. I got a ticket for loitering. Literally, I'm gonna tell you, this was like how many years ago? It's before I got married, so this is probably about 11 years ago. Right. We were hanging out with one of my buddies. I think it was a bachelor party or something, and the club was letting out, and we were in the parking lot, and the cops came around and said, "Hey, y'all gotta leave." It's like, okay, I'm not driving, I'm not in the position to drive, but I'm in the car and I can't go nowhere. Right. And the dude driving had left the car, and he was walking off somewhere, and I'm sitting in the car, and the cops came back around. We told y'all to leave. Doggone it, I got a freaking loitering ticket myself. Now, again, I paid the ticket because I ain't want to have no issues, but so to your point, that stuff happens.
But see, their loitering is a citation in Florida. You go to jail.
See, look, and this was in Georgia. Yeah. So this was in Georgia, and I don't remember. It had to be 2007, something like that. So, and and that's interesting there, because state by state there are different nuances that come into play, and to your point, and it's crazy. It's funny you even say that. Again, I am them takes on a whole new meaning. I could have gone to jail that night had it been Florida, and had it not been Georgia. And again, me and my homeboys, we're all college educated. We're just hanging out, bachelor party from my buddy getting married. And just because we took a few extra minutes to leave the parking lot and got a loitering citation in Florida, that would have been clank, clank. We got to go to the pen.
It would have been an arrest. And the thing is that those, there's people who do the exact same thing and they get away with it and their life is fine. But the ones who happen to get caught in that particular instance, they have to live with the results of that and the consequences of that for the rest of their life. They're reminded of it every time they have put in an application to try to get a housing, to try to get a job. Anytime they try to get any kind of public assistance, they're always reminded of that one thing that could have been the one time that they did something that was wrong or that was considered an offense.
So fellas and ladies, I mean, if that doesn't make you take a step back and say, you know what, this is, we look at things and say like, oh, that's not my problem because that's not me, that's somebody else. Or the reality is, had you lived in a different state, that would have been your problem. And just me specifically. And again, we didn't rehearse this. This is just some random scenario that I threw out at you. And because these laws and stuff, you were just like, yeah, dude, had you been in Florida, that would have resulted in an arrest. And I'm just like, what would I have looked like for getting arrested because I'm in the passenger seat? I couldn't drive because I'm not in the state of being able to drive at the moment. And somebody else was driving and they had walked around somewhere else in the parking lot. We couldn't go anywhere. That would have resulted in an arrest. And something as simple as that is how sometimes, not all the time, but that's how sometimes people end up getting caught up. And that ends up becoming this thing that becomes a cycle that, oh my gosh. Look, ladies and gentlemen listening, this is Black Fathers Now. So we're speaking to the brothers. We know ladies listen to and all of that. Y'all get out and support Chainless Change. Visit chainlesschange.org. Email Mark at info@chainlesschange.org. Follow Chainless Change on Instagram and Facebook. And let him know that you heard about him on Black Fathers Now. Support this brother. Give him encouragement. Allow him, to just basically be empowered to keep doing what he's doing and realize that he's making a doggone difference, man. And then if you know the people at the Fortune Society out of New York, anybody listening, reach out to them and connect the dots. Dig that.
Yeah, you said the Fortune Society, and I think that they're great, but also Women at the Well is another good one.
What's the name of that?
Organization that I feel like would be really.
What's the name of that? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Women at the Well.
Okay.
It's Women at the Well.
Okay.
And we can just use help with people who are really skilled in grant writing and research.
Okay.
That's something that's a real need for us.
So check this out. Look, so one more again. We throwing this thing, and look, closed mouths don't get fed, player. Let's throw it out there. So the Fortune Society out of New York, Woman at the Well, as well as if you are a grant writer and anything that you heard today really just kind of piqued your interest, literally reach out, info@chainlesschange.org, and help this brother, man, make a difference, because his heart's there. His actions back it up. So he's got the fruit on the tree. Like the fruit is showing the work that he's doing. We got to support it and we got to push this, because, again, we need it as a society, but then also as individuals, we need this as well. So continue doing what you're doing, brother. I salute you and I appreciate you. And, again, going forward, anything that I can do with Black Fathers Now, with whatever I do, man, you say the word, man. You're part of the family. I know you're not a dad yet, but you're part of the Black Fathers Now family, brother.
I appreciate you, man. I appreciate you as well.
No doubt, no doubt. And so make sure, say that again, man.
I was just saying thank you for everything that you're doing.
Oh, man, look, man, one moment at a time, brother.
Our community, yeah.
That's it, one moment at a time. No faster, no slower, my brother. Well, y'all, check this out. Make sure to holler at Mark Mitchell. Again, info@chainlesschange.org. Visit chainlesschange.org or follow Chainless Change on Instagram and Facebook. Let them know you heard about them on Black Fathers Now. And, as always, visit blackfathersnow.com, subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, YouTube, anywhere you listen to podcasts, subscribe, share. Look, we need this. Share, leave comments. And, until next time, y'all be blessed, well, and wise. And I'll holler at you. Peace. Yo, fellas, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And always visit blackfathersnow.com, as well as follow Black Fathers Now on virtually every social media platform you can think of. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, everywhere. Just follow us and engage with us, man. Look forward to hearing from you. And I guess until next time, I'll holler at you. Peace.